All right. Well, it's great to be with you, Caleb. I'm excited to have you on today. How's the morning going?
Nice. It's a beautiful day in the Fresno area. We got kind of some mild weather for almost July, or almost the
Yeah.
end of
What's
July.
mild for Fresno in July?
Yeah, 92 or something today. So it's pretty good.
That is mild. Yeah. Fresno at this time of year, it's like triple digits and dry.
Yeah, a
That's
lot of lots of golf rounds in 100 plus in Fresno.
that's right. It hit it a long way, but sweat out a lot in that heat.
Yeah.
That's it's funny. Well, let's jump in, man. Let's talk a little bit about you. So you're obviously a Fresno resident now, but how about childhood? Where'd you grow up, and kind of what was the foundation for Caleb?
Yeah, so I started grew up in Dinuba, California, which is about 20-30 minutes southeast of Fresno, Clovis. I technically live in the city of Clovis, which is a big difference compared to Fresno. No, not really, but and so yeah, I got my start in a town called Dinuba, which is about 20-30 minutes southeast of Fresno, Clovis area. And I kind of grew up small town. I think there's about 30,000 people in the town now. And my mom worked in banking. My dad was a farmer. And somehow I ended up more on the banking side.
That's definitely, surprised you didn't get to like agricultural finance, but
Right.
So growing up, what was your kind of influences, and what were the things that kind of shaped you as a kid growing up?
As a kid growing up, I think the things that shaped me the most was sports and being part of a team, working just to be the best I could be at my craft, whether that be baseball or football or basketball or track. Ended up playing collegiately in baseball and in football, and so I think those are the things that shaped me the most from my young days until where I am now. Is just having the athletic background and knowing what hard work kind of does for you as far as like on the field or just with your job.
That's a big driving lesson. So I imagine that your parents were toting you around quite a bit, and you were going from one thing to another with multiple sports. Was your childhood pretty much sports heavy? We would share that in common pretty heavily.
Yeah, I would say that growing up, sports were very heavy. I would say it's a little bit unlike today, where it seems like you specialize early and you play 100 baseball games a year or something like that. I kind of found that there was a lot of beauty in being able to play many different sports at a young age, and just being able to learn how to catch a football or throw a baseball or shoot a basketball and all those different things. Kind of I feel like made me a better all around player and athlete. But now it's different. It seems like people start specializing a lot earlier and kind of just stick with one lane. So I'm kind of excited, and I try to raise my kids to kind of have a broader spectrum of sports. And I still enjoy playing golf. I still challenge myself at golf, even at the age I'm at now. And I feel that it's just a fun thing to have multiple talents instead of just one. But obviously, with where our world is economically, and if you could ever make it to the pros or something like that as a sports professional, you can do pretty well.
Yeah, the specialization is definitely money driven, like everything else. But yeah, the competitive nature is kind of it's a great lesson that we learn early on. I totally agree. The more you do, the more dynamic movements that you learn, the more hand-eye coordination, foot coordination, things that you develop, and also keeps it fresh so that the passion kind of for the game stays burning when you don't play it too much, at a young age. But so talk a little bit about you played obviously then in high school and then on to collegiately. How did your collegiate career come about, and talk a little about your memories of your college career and the education that you were subsequently able to obtain.
Yeah. So I, being that I didn't specialize, and I felt like I was good, or other coaches felt like I was good at a lot of things, that kind of, maybe led to my, professional career demise or something like that. Or maybe that's just a joke that I had within myself. But yeah, I always could do a lot of things pretty well. And so in football, I played wide receiver, and I joke often with coworkers here in the office that being in sales is a lot like being a wide receiver, and you have to be willing to go across the middle, and sometimes you get hit, and you just got to make a good wide receiver, you have to get back up and go back after it. So and then I played baseball, and kind of the same thing there. I went through most of my career as an outfielder, and then all of a sudden I got to a 4-year school, playing baseball, playing outfield, and they're like, "Oh, you have a pretty good arm. Like, have you pitched?" And I said, "Well, a couple innings in my junior college career." And the next thing you know, I was on the mound and starting every weekend when we played. So it was kind of an interesting thing for me, is that I was always kind of good at a lot of different aspects of sports. Whether, like I said, playing receiver and catching the ball, it helped that I was fast, but all those different skills, none of them were ever mastered, but I had many of them.
You're able to adapt and be versatile. That's a skill set in itself, right? Versatility and ability to be, multidimensional. So what were some of the lessons that your athletic and kind of sports careers, between all the coaches that you get affected by, the things that your parents kind of tend to help instill in you in life tend to overlap in the sports world, and a lot of that tends to carry over to a lot of things that we do moving forward. So what was your kind of takeaway through your sports career?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway, or what I maybe have put, from the sports world and into my business, is that in sports you deal with so much, adversity, where every single game we play, there's a really good chance that we lose. Every single, especially with baseball, every single time you walk up to, hit, you don't get a hit. There's so much failure in it. And I think what it's really allowed me to, to pull into my professional life is just like, things don't always go your way, but you can still get to a winning outcome. And I think that that's probably the thing that I value the most, is just that I can stay pretty level-headed and calm through a transaction. And I just attribute that to having lots of failures in sports. So you don't make every shot you shoot, you don't hit every ball you swing at, and you don't throw a strike every time, that you throw a pitch, or you don't get to catch the ball every time that it's thrown to you either. So those things, and just keeping me kind of calm, throughout a little bit of, sometimes we say there's fires, those moments of just kind of being able to stay calm, and knowing that, like, if you put in the work and you have the right mindset, or you're willing to go down, and battle on the next portion, that you're going to get to the finish line and everything's going to be good.
That's a great point. I mean, we talk to our kids all the time now. You hear it all the time. Life is about how you handle adversity, how you handle failure, because it's the most predictably guaranteed thing that you're going to experience. Nobody's perfect, and how you handle adversity ultimately determines how much adversity you're going to continue to face, and
Right.
how much success you're going to achieve. So those are great lessons to to carry forward and move. So as your as a playing career and all of the sports, what was your like major? What did you study in college?
Yeah, so my major actually finished. I moved back to California once I finished playing baseball, and I finished my degree in political science and sociology at the University of Chapman. And so it was a great day when I got that done. It was always something that I wanted to do for myself, and playing sports throughout college. You're taking classes and you have to stay involved in all the classes and maintain your GPA and stuff like that. And when I kind of got done and decided to move back, the major that I was in, it wasn't even an option anymore, because I was in a totally different location. So, I always liked history. I kind of liked, learning about, political stuff. So I went down that route of political science and sociology, and was able to kind of, finish my degree. And I do remember when I finished my degree, because it wasn't at year 4 or year 5. I think it was like year 7 or something like that, when I was finally done after being away from high school. The sense of accomplishment was just pretty awesome and overwhelming. I'm a little bit of an emotional person. And so that I remember, when I finally, clicked that I was done with my last class or whatever. I think I had to take like an online course. It was such a, oh my gosh, this is finally over, and such a also a great feeling of accomplishment at the same time.
That's really true. So obviously you went off and played baseball further, and then circled back
for my degree.
For your degree, yeah. I laugh at your the emotional around it, because I'm the same way. I used to have dreams. I don't know if they were nightmares, but they were always dreams where I would find out like 10 years later that I had not finished my high school classes or my college classes. And I used to always look at like surreal that you'd still worry, like, are you done? And I'd wake up like, man, that's a trip, the idea that you would somehow have not finished. But
right.
It's a nice feeling when you move on, but then you're like, all right, what next? And most of us, maybe all of us, didn't, unless we had family, and it didn't necessarily say, oh, I'm going to be in mortgage, or I'm going to be a mortgage originator kind of as our self-identified career, but we often just kind of find our way into it. So how did you end up, into the mortgage industry? Was it your first kind of initial career that you evolved into, or did you do some other things that led into it?
Yeah. So I actually, when I got done playing, I wanted to coach, and I wanted to coach at a college level. So I coached college baseball for a couple years, which, didn't provide much as far as food and shelter. So I ended up picking up a second job at a golf course. And I loved golf, but I hadn't played a whole lot. And the golf course, being that it opened really early, I was able to go there, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, set up carts, do different things like that, set up tournaments, and then, be able to make it back for baseball practice 2 or 3 o'clock. And that was that's kind of how I got my start, after college. And then golf kind of led me into mortgage business, being that there was a guy who worked in the mortgage business at one of the golf courses. We had a conversation one time about, I had a degree. He worked and owned a mortgage company, and didn't understand why I wanted to be poor and work in golf. And so he kind of offered me a job in the mortgage business. And so I took it. I just kind of, took a leap, and he thought I would be good at it. I thought it was something that sounded fun. And so I went for it. I worked as a wholesale account executive, kind of in the subprime world. And that was when I first got my start in the mortgage business.
So you got in through the wholesale, and what year was that?
That was like 2005 through 2007. And then as the implosion of the subprime industry kind of happened, I had to figure something else out. So I went back into golf. So I worked in golf for a couple more years. And then, once I decided, hey, it's time for family, time for, a wife, that type of stuff, I said, well, you know, the golf thing is a little bit Monday, you know, it's not Monday through Friday. It's more, you know, uh, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And
Yeah.
so that made it a little bit difficult. I started thinking, I'm like, well, what could I do? And then I started looking back into real estate, and then, and mortgage. A couple of the connections that I had made through golf here in Fresno said, you've already done mortgage. I think, that would be a good route to go back. And so I ended up kind of doing all the necessary things, my 20-hour cert at the time, doing all the state and national testing, and
Hmm.
next thing I know, I was back in the mortgage world, and I've been here in Fresno doing mortgage since 2012.
So, and since 2012, so you got in 05, 06 window. I was 06, 07, which, yeah, that was about, you had a little bit of a decent run before we hit the collapse. Um, you mentioned obviously now you're married, family. So talk a little bit about kind of that phase. And you mentioned, the reality of juggling life, family, passions, finances, all of those things that, is life 101. So how'd you meet your wife? Where the family kind of unfolded, and what part of the story does that fit in?
Yeah, no, I have some crazy stories so I met my wife through some friends. We got married in 2011. And then, so kind of my mortgage, my rebirth in my mortgage career kind of happened about a year after I was married. So I was working in golf my first year. And then my second year, I decided that it was time to go get a bigger job. And so I started back in the mortgage business, and, in a couple of years later, um, 2014, my wife says, "Hey, I'm pregnant," and we kind of just took a leap of faith. She quit her job. She stayed home with the kids for the last 11 years. My son's actually turning 11 tomorrow, and so she's done a little bit of substitute teaching over the last year or so. But we have been able to raise two boys for the past 11 years. Just um, you know me being able to work in the mortgage business and have some flexibility. And obviously it's super great that she's able to take care of all the things at home, and running them to school and back and stuff like that. And so that's kind of how the whole family dynamics has worked.
That's great. So father of two boys. Well, happy early birthday to your boy.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that's big. July is a big month in our house. So we got our oldest turned 14 on the 16th as well, and it's a heavy birthday household for the Rasmussens. So hot summer birthday parties.
Yeah, yeah,
Always
we have
good.
one tomorrow.
Yeah, swimming in pools. So the family, you mentioned the lot of overlap. I think I coached collegiately after my career as well, and got moved my wife from Sacramento to Chico like a week or two after our first was born, and it's tough to make a living on coaching and support a family. So you kind of have these juggling responsibilities, but when you start to pivot and juggle all of the life responsibilities, and then you start inserting your career and mortgage as an originator took hold, what drew you to becoming a mortgage originator, to becoming a loan officer, and what part about that kind of journey and profession do you enjoy most?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of people, you just kind of end up in the mortgage business. It doesn't really, the mortgage business doesn't really seek you out. You just kind of end up in it somehow, and that's kind of how I attribute it to. It was just some people that tended to, worked in the business that maybe saw something in me, and they're like, "Hey, I think you would also do good in this," and that's kind of how I ended up in it. And then I think what's kept me along for more than almost a decade and a half now, I think what's kept me in it is just there's a lot going on, and and not any two loans have ever been the same. They all seem to have, something different. I mean, there's some that are easier than others, some that are, very difficult, and we have clients that we've helped for 3 years try to figure out how to get their credit score to the right spot so that they could qualify for down payment assistance, or just get their credits in a spot where they could qualify for a mortgage. And to be honest, on my side, those are my favorite. My favorite loans are the ones that are the hardest. The ones that, sometimes in the middle of the night I wake up and I'm like, oh, what if I did this, or what if we did this, would that work? And then, get up the next day and sit down and basically, just try to figure some things out. And so, it takes more than just, looking at some numbers and sending it on to the next person. Sometimes the level of what you have to do is almost like get in the brain of the person that you're trying to help, and basically say, hey, here's situation X, and your situation is going to be better if you do do a new loan and you pay off debt or something like that. So
Yeah.
definitely not like one of those things where everybody's just like, hey, you just come to me and you get a loan and you move down the line. Sometimes it's, you come to me, you show me everything, and we think about it for multiple days before we actually can have it get to a point where it even truly starts. So but
Yep.
those are the most rewarding for me by far. I like the easy ones, but at the same time, first time home buyers that walk in and they're scared, and and all we're doing is a soft pull on their credit so that and it's not going to affect their credit score, and just trying to give them some advice to see them get from that point to a point where they're they have a house for their upcoming baby or their young kids or something like that. That's when it's super special.
Absolutely. Well, I say it all the time. Loans are as unique as people. I mean, the guidelines are the same, but every human being is unique, and every family is unique when you compile all them and their jobs, their finances, their histories. Inevitably, that means you're dealing with something different in virtually every scenario, and that's usually what we deal with, right? Is
Right.
that's variation. And the other part is people don't live their life on the idea of borrowing money. So most of the time when they first connect with someone like yourself, they haven't been planning and prepping and making all their moves to make their loan the easiest. So that usually is the start of like, oh, that wasn't probably the best move if I was applying for a loan, or this is
Right.
complicated. Those are the things that unfold. So when you get those, you mentioned liking the difficult loans, and the ones where you have to problem solve and kind of help people. I imagine a lot of this because it's rewarding to be able to help somebody that maybe doesn't think that they can buy or obtain financing, or they're certainly just more appreciative and grateful because they're not in a situation where this was a slam dunk and you've helped them kind of do something in their life that can set up some the best opportunity for generational wealth, or just to establish a home. So talk a little bit about kind of from your perspective, what those relationships are like when you get to engage with your clients like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do take for, I mean, even I take for granted, it's just like how many great situations people have been in that maybe didn't believe in themselves, and so I attribute some of that to like just a coaching background or the team background. I mean, there's a lot of times in team sports where you think you're down and out, and all of a sudden somebody bloops one over the first baseman's head, and now all of a sudden you got a runner at second and you have a chance to tie a game. And so sorry for using the sports.
No, that's a perfect
analogies, but yeah, so it's just one of those things where like sometimes it's just there's a situation that looks tough, and but they get to the table, and then for us, and I can go back through my pipeline. Obviously, we worked in some times where we've had traditional or even better than traditional returns on real estate. And I have people who purchased homes for $100,000 to $200,000, and they still have them, or they still use them as rentals. And none of them are upside down. They all have, they're all sitting on this equity that they never would have had if they didn't just take the chance to come sit down. And sometimes it was an uncle that was like, hey, go talk to this guy. He could probably help you, or just a family friend or somebody from church. And I honestly could look back through almost every single scenario that I've done since 2012, and basically show you like equity for each and every one of those people. And so that part, when we sit down and we're doing a talk like this, it almost makes me emotional just thinking about how cool that is. Like, we get to do something that really does, in fact, impact somebody's family and impact their family's family. So it's really cool that we get to do something often overlooked, obviously, but I just think that what we do is really rewarding. If we just stop and smell the roses and look around and basically be like, oh my gosh, like, I've helped people create a lot of wealth in the decade and a half that I've been doing retail mortgage.
Absolutely. That's a big reward aspect of it. And it's also a little bit of, you get put behind the scenes, right, with families and their lifestyles, their all that, because you have to help them sort through their picture, right, which the financial picture is tied to the picture of the rest of their lives. And then people have to continue to do what it is they do. So people don't always make it easy on themselves, not that they want to, but they're just operating. So when you're looking at the business of navigating that, what are some of your favorite memories, maybe particular stories where you were able to really help people, and any on the flip side, anything that you would recommend or advise people avoid doing or not doing that can make that process much more difficult and cause some roadblocks for them?
Yeah. One of the biggest things in our industry is obviously just the debt to income ratio. And so a lot of times when you wish that you could have got to a client before they bought that $600 car payment, right? The really nice car that they bought with that now has a $600 payment. And because that $600 payment hurts them so much when they're trying to purchase a house. And we know that, you're going to make some money off a house. And we also know that you're probably not going to make so much off that car. And so those are the things that, that I like to share with people. It's like, hey, I don't mind if you have a younger child or something like that that's interested in buying a house someday. Get them over to me now. 2 years from now, they would, they have all the knowledge and stuff like that they might make better decisions. So they're in a better spot to be able to, purchase a house or something like that 2 years down the line. And maybe they won't have, a $600 mortgage payment and, a $600 car payment that, is causing them, trouble with their qualifying for what they want. And so I would say, that's probably one of the biggest things, is just trying to, the cost is free to come sit down and talk about your mortgage, or what a potential mortgage would look like for you.
The financial planning piece on that for sure. And obviously part of the business is developing relationships and strategic partnerships that are there to serve the clients and the home buyers in every step of the journey. And so you work in our line of work with a lot of real estate agents, and you're hand in hand and working that transaction. What's your experience been like, and what do you enjoy most in terms of that dynamic of partnering up with real estate agents?
Yeah, I find the most joy in partnering up with agents, just because it seems like to me, like, I love the relationship part of it, and I gain a lot of friends. I met up with one of my realtors that I have been friends with since 2013. I think we both kind of started. We were both kind of green. He's had some major life, struggles, with health and losing a wife and stuff like that. And, to be there for him, those things are the most rewarding things out of like the referral partners, is just getting to know somebody more. I love human connection. So I love having a conversation. I love hearing about, their family or their kids or, their golf game, whatever it may be. So I find that this business is just fun as far as when it comes to real estate referral partners and stuff like that, just because it's almost like I get to, it forces me to go find a new friend. And, and sometimes those connections are, lifelong, and that's what makes that part cool.
Yep, it's a collaborative relationship for sure, and everybody has a role. And people sometimes forget in in our line of work, like the emotional dynamic around those transactions. When you're arranging your moving trucks, you're trying to schedule movers and pack boxes and juggle the kids soccer practice and get the kids to school. Like there's all these things that people have to navigate when it comes to the moving process and supplying the information necessary to get the loan and juggling. So what's your kind of, or when you sit down with someone early on and they're getting ready to go into the process, do you have some things that you like to cover to kind of prepare them, things that kind of help them get in front of the things that can lead to stressors down the road in the transaction, to try to help alleviate some of those potential high stress and complications that can come up later in the process?
Yeah, so I try to make the process as stress-free as possible. There's, lots of things going on. There's home inspections and appraisals and getting loan estimates, getting closing disclosures, and everybody is, it's a lot of information. It's information overload. The disclosure portions are 100 pages, and 44 of it is a book that we have to provide, and so just kind of preparing them for, this is what's going to be on there. This is what, this is why it's on there. I like to kind of share, how the mortgage works, how, if somebody's coming from the rent world and they're going to have a mortgage, that they almost get to skip, or they do get to skip a month's payment because mortgages are paid in arrears instead of, paying in advance for, the place that you're going to live. So a lot of times, that relieves some pressure, that they don't have to think, oh my gosh, I have to make the payment, next month, when, they would actually make the payment the following month. And, they're already stressed about money because, they're bringing some to the table. Other things that I like to share are just taxes and insurance and how that works, and how, when you take the house, you have to have insurance on it. And next year, when we get to, back to the anniversary that you got your house, you're going to have insurance again. And so, because you're not making your payment and there's payments that are impounded in your mortgage, that's why we're collecting some additional when we're doing your closing, and talk to them about their property taxes and when they're due and why we're collecting, a certain amount of months extra and stuff like that. So those little conversations, I feel, travel very far, because they're not getting something in the mail from the county or getting, something from the servicer, saying, hey, you owe us extra money, or, here's a check for the overage. And so just kind of laying some groundwork with that, and kind of just talking through like the most important parts. I just think that it makes it easier for them to just kind of grasp some basic mortgage stuff, and then just try to have, a smooth transaction. Also with locks and stuff like that, I just add, whenever it comes to locks, and when is the best time to lock. I mean, the adage, nobody has a crystal ball, nobody knows exactly where it's going to go. If you're comfortable with the payment and you want to lock the loan, let's lock it, right? We don't have to sit over here and worry that we're going to be losing $600 or gaining $600. There's a lot more going on in the transaction than the extra stress for, the potential of, a day's, small swing or something like that. Obviously we're not trying to advise them to wait when the world is saying to lock, and we, follow experts that tell us, where they think it's going to go, and they're not right all the time, but they're right a lot of the time. And so I use those tools to help, give those tools to my clients, and then hopefully just take the stress away from all those things that we can run into in the loan.
Those are great pieces of advice. And a lot of times people do get distracted, right, by like different things, and realizing that they want to obtain certain aspects of their experience. Like rate is a big one. Like you can try to time the interest rate all you want, but if you don't have the house, it's never going to matter. So you really have to find the house that you want to live in and secure it, and then you can time interest rates much more so when you have an open-ended timeline versus a fixed timeline. And then within, like you said, incremental gains versus potentially larger losses is the other thing, where sometimes you're like, it's like that person at the blackjack table that's up, and they're like, I want to win another $50, and they're like, what, you're leaving 1,000 on the table. Like, do you really want to risk 1,000 for $50 here? Like, but those are I think great pieces of advice you're mentioning. And when you think about the experience over the years and the relationships that you form, what do you do, and kind of what's your approach to staying in touch with your clients, and after they secure that home loan or their first time home buyer? One of the big things is staying on top of what happens in the market and potentially opportunities for them to save money with improved interest rates. What's your strategy and your approach to kind of staying as a resource for your clients post the close of their initial loan?
Yeah, so I actually like to use a couple different systems. Obviously our CRM gives us a little bit of insight if somebody like lists their house or something like that. But I also use a program called HomeBot, and I get my past clients on HomeBot. HomeBot basically kind of gives you an update each month on the value of your house, and kind of the trend of where your house is going. It also, shares my face once a month and stuff like that. So that I feel like that's really good. That's one of my favorite tools, and a tool that a lot of my past clients use. I feel that giving them a little bit of something afterwards is just, that they can, kind of look at every month and say, okay, the value of the houses in my neighborhood seem to be going up, or, it allows them to, play with some numbers and calculate some stuff if they were thinking about, making that house a rental, or if they're thinking about, hey, I need some money for my kids' college or something like that. So that program is really good. One of my other favorite things is I like to just kind of reach out every once in a while to some past clients, especially on a day that's not going so well. They're your fans, right? They're fans of me. I help them, gain equity. I help them, make memories in their new home and stuff like that. So a lot of times, like, when things aren't going so great, I'll be like, hey, let's give like three or four past clients a call that I haven't talked to in a couple of years, and see how things are going and check in with them. And a lot of times that, that leads to, filling my heart with joy instead of, dreading that, something didn't go right that day.
That's a great it's a great kind of vibe on it. And sorry, I don't know what the hell my camera just did here, but
You got
it like it just decided to zoom in on me. But I'm trying to move it here. You're doing great, dude. Only because I want to be able to on. Here we go. All right.
There it goes. It looks like you got better.
What is it?
I do have a little bit of respect for those guys that are just sitting there for 3 hours doing podcasts and don't really edit a whole lot. All right.
Yeah, no, you're great. See that you're rolling, and your answers are good. So uh, it's actually easy most of the time to kind of keep going through it when you keep it conversational, right? Because you're not trying to be perfect. So
Right, right.
and then we clip out like, well, whatever part of where my camera went squirrely, we'll have it all zoomed in on you anyway. So
Well, the other part that's cool too is like I think it's the marketing department that says, the only bad videos are the ones you don't put out, right? Like, so it's like getting over that hump of just like trying to be more vulnerable and being on the just getting something out there is totally worth it. I did
yeah.
bomb for a while through my emails,
Mhm.
and the first few bombs, I was like watching them back and being like, oh man, like, and I redo it. And then, after that, it was just like, just
Just
film it
do
and
it.
fire.
Yep. And so the part that's on this aspect I think is huge is that point of like what you don't realize is like a percentage of people aren't going to watch, aren't going to watch, right, aren't going to look, so whatever you're worried about, don't notice, and then a large percentage aren't going to see what you see as far as the criticism. But even if they're like, oh, that wasn't great, it moves down your social media list. So like it really is just about doing it consistently, because then when they look at your page, that one that you're like, oh, that wasn't my best, a month later, it's 35 or 40 posts down on your stream. So they're not actually going to go
No, nobody's going to
hit
search.
that. But when
Yeah.
they look at you and they see that you've been posting for that long, that's more validating. So, you end up benefiting from it. And then no matter what people say, it's just like the reps with, hitting a golf ball or
Right.
hitting a baseball, you get better the more that you do it. And because you become less critical, you figure out which things you really hate that that come out. So yeah, no, it's perfect. So all right, so let's keep going into when you look at your family today, right? I mean, obviously you're married, you have kids, so talk a little about your family life and how you juggle being a dad, being a husband, being a professional, and what's the best part of blending that in your life.
Yeah. So I think, you know, ever since COVID, it really changed the way that we do business, the way that our consumers send business to us, and that's kind of come as a huge blessing over the last 5 or 6 years with where my kids are in life. Like I said, I have one that's going to be 11, and I have one who's 8, and so for the last 5 years, I've been able to work from home. Go to their events and really not skip a beat. I mean, I have to make sure that I'm still making my phone calls and I'm still doing those type of things. But as far as like with family and with the job, it's been easier in the last 5 years to do what we do, it's where it's not so much like we're in the office every single hour of every single day, or maybe it's not that we're not. It's just more acceptable that we're not. But that's made great strides for family time, and my kids love to play baseball, so I helped coach with their baseball, and in the past, if I was just sitting there and grinding in my business and showing up and making sure I was at the office from 9 to 5 every day or something like that, I wouldn't get to do all those things. So as far as like family life and just being able to be a mortgage professional and have time with the family, it's turned out to be an amazing blessing that we kind of just got forced into, being able to, or having to work from home, and then learning through that process that we can work from home, or we can take time off and kind of go out and do those things and still be able to function fully. I mean, for me, I'll go on vacation with the family and nobody knows that I'm gone unless I'm posting on Instagram or Facebook, just because I still answer all my phone calls. I still have my computer there, so I don't completely turn it off ever. But at the same time, with all the automation that we have, all the technology that we have, here at BBM, there's many times where I've never even seen a client in person and they, got their keys to their house.
Yeah, that's a big advantage in the process, right? It's just to allow uh, people to continue about their lives and not have to be as disruptive, right? Like having to stop collecting paperwork is, I'm sure there are some people that enjoy that, but the mass majority of us don't love digging into our own paperwork and finding it and collecting it. So when you're able to, you know, make that efficient and less difficult and disruptive, that's a big lift. And our industry continues to see enhancements with the technology. You mentioned vacations. It's an and coaching baseball, we share that. And I think this business is one of those ones where your time is flexible, but you're always working, right? Because you're always on call and you're always available. And vacations oftentimes are like Murphy's Law. They're the busiest that you'll get. I know you mentioned getting married. When I got married in '09, we were in Hawaii. We went to Hawaii for 2 weeks, Kauai and Maui for our honeymoon. That month of August was the most I ever closed in a month. And I worked during our honeymoon quite a bit because it was like, yeah, this is not the month that we're just going to like check out. Like there's so much happening. So luckily my wife was an underwriter when I met her. So she kind of understood the business and the grind, but that's, I think one of the cool parts of the business. And so how does your wife and kids, what's their, kind of receptive? Are they okay when you have to step away from the dinner table here and there, or on a 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night, maybe you're jumping into something? What's that been like for you?
Yeah, I think it's just an understanding that they have, that's what dad does. He sometimes has to take a phone call. I mean, I'm not, I can, push the button that says I'll call you back later if it's something, major, or we're in a baseball game or something like that.
Yeah.
And I just try to communicate that too. Like, hey, I'm at a baseball practice with my kids and I'll call you back. And, people are understanding. It's very rare that somebody would be like, well, you screwed up and you didn't answer my phone call. And if you don't respond to me in the next 25 minutes, then, I'm going to move on to the next person. So, I think, being personal with it as well, and being, straightforward, honest, and just kind of saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. And, I will get to you as soon as I can. And as long as you get to them when you said that you were going to, the process is pretty simple. And so, we don't want to miss things with our kids. We don't want to, my kids, find a lot of joy in just getting their awards at school. Their student of the month type things, and reaching their reading goals or their math goals. And they walk around the house and they mimic the principal or the person that, is saying, their stuff. And so those things mean stuff to them. And I try to make it to those events. And, if someone calls and says, hey, can you help me? I just try to communicate that and just say, hey, look, I'll give you a call back. I'm at an award ceremony for my son or whatever. And I think that part, especially in our business, when it's financials and, like we just talked about, we don't always see every client, before they have their keys to their house. I think it's nice for them to know sometimes that, oh, this guy has a family and he values that. And I trust that more than some guy that I have no idea what he's doing, or he would never tell me what he's doing. So I am a little bit probably more personal, and share more of what I'm doing and, why I wasn't able to make the return call in 5 minutes or something like that. I'm getting on a plane coming back from Maui, and, I'll get back to you and as soon as I can, is basically more personal. And that's kind of how I feel like I like to do my business anyway. I like it to be personal. I don't like it to feel rigid. I don't like it to feel like somebody's coming in here and I'm, giving them the exact direction. I want to feel, what their pain points are and be able to receive them. And I don't think I can do that if I'm just basically giving them direction. So, I have one of my favorite sayings is, I don't have to pay your mortgage. You have to. So you have to be comfortable with what's on this paper and how much you're going to be paying. And so, I don't have to pay your mortgage. So you have to. And so I'm not the person that is I'm
Got
back.
the
I'm
back.
back.
There we go.
I think it was holding my notifications until I got that call right there, and then all of a sudden it
Then
was,
I gotcha.
it
No,
was going
good.
crazy. You can hear me?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, now I can't hear you again. Weird.
Let's see. Can you hear me right now?
Huh.
Your speaker, you might have to check your.
All right, I can hear you now. All right. Yeah.
Oh, reload.
So anyway, I'm just going through that last part again, and I don't know how it got cut off or whatever, but yeah, the whole fact that I don't have to make their mortgage payment, they have to make their mortgage payment is just, that's just something that I literally say almost all the time to every single client, and I want them just to feel comfortable when they have their their estimate when they're walking out, or when they have their closing disclosure at the end of the transaction, that they're like, yep, my payment is $3,000 a month, and that's what I know I can afford, and I've thought about for the last however many days before I sign my name on the they're signing their name with the notary on those documents that are securing that house for them. So
yep, that's a good point. What I always would say to people, right, is just because you can qualify doesn't mean that you should. Like that literally, depending on your situation and whether or not we're using your income but not your spouse's. Yeah, if your DTI is a higher end qualification, yeah, we're pushing because we know we have a whole bunch of income we're not even using. So we're worried about qualifying you in that lane. But if we're using every drop of income you have, and yes, you qualify, but that payment isn't manageable, then we should be not have, like, that doesn't mean we should still do this. And that's I always used to say that same thing. Yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And
right.
so let's make sure. But having that insight, and then where people can pivot, save some money, repurpose. You kind of become a financial advisor, counselor, occasionally marriage counselor. Sometimes I always found it interesting. Sometimes where you'll get insight into how couples interact, or maybe they don't talk during the day because they're at work, and so then you kind of telling the same thing to two people even though they're together. And those are all parts of what you do to try to make their life easier, right, to kind of create the experience as less disruptive. But when you look at kind of the last few years and the market and what the change is that we've kind of experienced, I mean, you mentioned kind of getting in for the most kind of notorious kind of real estate challenge market that we dealt with post collapse. Then it's been a healthy market with really low interest rates, to the degree that people got so accustomed to what were absurdly low rates that when 6 and 7% rolled around, people thought that was astronomically high. And so we've been in this market for a few years. What's your kind of take and stance and advice to people that are moving, because life didn't stop moving along and families kept growing and jobs kept getting acquired? So what's that feedback been from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I would say with where we are with the current market and where we have just left, we've had some major times of people coming and sitting down, where big numbers of people coming and sitting down and going through things and basically walking away, and they're like, yeah, I can't afford that, and the rates were in the high sevens, and so it seems like we got comfortable, as like the rates are high, and they're starting to get lower, and we're starting to see a few more people kind of to come out there. My concern for my current clients that are just kind of on the fence is that if they could afford it now, if all of a sudden the rates go to 5.5%, the amount of people that we have seen to see over the last few years that didn't happen, that didn't make it to the closing table and end up in a house, that number seems like it's really big. And most of those people I call back, they didn't go to another lender, they just kind of gave up for a while. And so my advice is, like, if you can't afford it, it's probably going to be cheaper for you if you did it now than if you waited and all of a sudden, the $400,000 house that is just sitting there and might be offering, $5,000 to $10,000 credit that you can, leverage now versus, say it's first quarter next year where we're looking at, rates have dropped, 0.5%. And now all of a sudden that house is 415 and there's 6 offers. And, now you're fighting to see if you can just, be the one that got that house. And so, because the 415, the 420 is probably going to eat up the difference in that 0.5% lower interest rate that you just got, I'm communicating to people as, it doesn't cost that much money to do a refinance. And in the future, it's probably not going to be money out of your pocket to do that refinance. There is a cost to do the refinance, but once you can, you're going to be back in line with where you're at. Plus you're going to have a year of not only owning that home and paying, towards your own investment, but you're also going to have, probably an increase in the value of your house, because now all of a sudden the people that are trying to buy the same house that you bought for 400 are fighting over it for 415, 425, something like that.
That's a perfect point, and we talk about that all the time. In our line of work, right? That it's that timing thing. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're able to get a lower interest rate, but recognizing human behavior, so is everyone else. Everyone else is acting. So now you're competing with more people, which ultimately, simple economics, the price of the homes are going to go up. And the statistics show it, right? Like the data has, been undeniable about the trends. There's certainly troughs and gaps, but you can't refinance a home you don't own. And you certainly can't guarantee that you're going to be the one to get the house you want, or that the house that you want will even be on the market at the price points you can afford in that time frame. So when it's there, people have to, like you said, you got to secure it at a payment and a structure you can afford, and then from there you work to optimize your savings, and that's where the relationship with someone like yourself is so important. And when you talk to people that have done this, right, the opportunity to refinance and save money and improve their situation, it also comes with, hey, you've settled into that home, like that is your home now, like you get to build your life around it. So that's great advice. Do you, as we're kind of wrapping here and going, do you have any of your favorite stories or most memorable transactions where like you look back and go, these ones jumped out at me, something that happened with a particular transaction, good, bad, and different, that has stuck with you over the years?
Yeah, I think my favorite transaction of all time is a lady. I referenced it a little bit earlier when we were speaking, but her uncle wanted her to get to see where she's at and to see where she could qualify for a potential house, and about every year on the year she would come back, and so I would say the stories probably started around 2016, 2017, something like that. And the uncle comes in with her, and she has a job. She takes care of people, like in-home supportive services type, and so she has some money. She does the service. She's doing a lot. She's raising a kid, single mom raising her kid. And I was like, okay, you got to make sure that you catch up on your bills and pay your bills, and then then you could potentially qualify for whatever. And then the next year she came back and she was like, okay, what do I need to do now? And it was like, well, you need to save a little bit of money unless we're going to use down payment assistance. And I kind of laid everything out, and her uncle would come back with her every time. And then the third time around, so this is year 3, she comes back, and her credit scores are in a spot where like down payment assistance is now available to her. And we laid kind of everything out. And then she's like, yeah, but I've saved up some money, so I think I can make this work. And fast forward, 6-7 months later or something, she's, working with the real estate agent, and the agent's showing her house that, that she can afford, and she knows all about it. And like, I just remember like when she signed her loan docs, I think we had her in the office, and she was super excited and almost like is this really happening? You know, we've talked so much and so many things, and so that was the most rewarding transaction that I think that we've had. Um, but on top of that, seeing her, you know, I think I called her last year, maybe somewhere in the end of 2024, just because I happened to look back on her situation. And that girl who spent, you know, 3 years trying to get qualified, all of a sudden, you know, she's sitting on like $150,000 worth of equity in the house that she ended up, you know, doing all on her own. And so like that was just such a cool story. And obviously you have to be in the business for quite a bit of time to have those kind of stories. So I'm aging myself a little bit, but yeah, I mean, those are the ones that are just so awesome where it's just, you know, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy from the start. She never gave up. We never gave up on her. And then, you know, she finally made it happen, and she made it happen. I didn't, because I don't make the mortgage payment. And then, you know, at the same time, now she's sitting on, you know, a good chunk of equity. And, you know, I mean, I think when she closed that transaction was probably time when we were at historic lows as far as interest rates go. So she could probably hold on to that house for, you know, the rest of her life, and maybe even her kid's life. And, you know, if she decides to go to a different house, I mean, that house will be free and clear, and she'll have a rental, and she'll have an income producing property as well as all that equity in her home.
That's a great story. And you touched on something in there that I was, you know, was going to be my next question, which is, you know, you've been in the business for, you know, approaching 20 years throughout the period. How has your perspective on the business, or how have you, you know, changed or evolved in terms of how you approach it over the course of, you know, your career tenure?
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, obviously when I first got into the business, I had no clue what was going on. I mean, I think the whole industry wasn't as good and clean as it is now. There was way less regulation. Um, there was probably a bunch of bad apples that were just trying to make a quick buck and stuff like that. So I feel like the people who have been in the industry and they've been through Dodd-Frank and they've been through TRID and, you know, all the different things, you know, that we've done to make our industry, you know, as good as it can be, you know, as much as we hated them every single time we had to change as a loan officer, it's been for the better. And I feel it's a lot more transparent, which, you know, is ultimately like the part that I want for my clients. I don't want them to walk into something and be like, you know, oh my gosh, I thought you said this was a fixed rate note and it's a, you know, an adjustable. You know, that doesn't, you know, can't happen, doesn't happen. And all those things, you know, kind of make it much easier for us and much easier for the consumer as well. And so I think that, you know, just going back through the time and just kind of not knowing, and it seemed like a little bit of the Wild West, and now it just seems like it's much more, you know, it's more regulated, it's cleaner, it's very transparent. You see every single dollar spent in the whole transaction, and where each one of those things is going. And I feel like that's the way that it should be. And you know, it almost, you know, makes me proud to say that I don't even have to think about having it be that transparent, because it's to the point where that's just the way it is. And so that we've come a long way since 2005 to 2025, and rightly so. So many more benefits for the consumer, or so many more rights for the consumer that that basically show up with the loan estimate and the closing disclosure, and those type of things where they can, you know, they can make their own choices, and they can see exactly, you know, line by line how much they're spending.
Absolutely. Well, as we wrap here, let me ask you kind of a one last one here. So, what someone asks you, you know, what do you identify with as what sets you apart? What can people expect when they work with you, and what do you commit to from a personal perspective as kind of your you know, your brand and your reputation that customers and referral partners can count on?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when people call, I answer my phone. When people text, I text them back. You know, those are two simple things, and you know, they do run into family time sometimes and things like that. But when when someone's in need, if whether it be, you know, a client that wants me to go over a loan estimate, or a referral partner that just needs me to reach out and touch base with somebody that just met at an open house, I feel like I'm always there, and I feel like I've always kind of had that as as part of, you know, who I am. And not only just, you know, I'm going to make a phone call. You know, I feel like I'm a person of care. Like I want to listen to what you got. You know, let me see if what I have can help you solve your problem. And so those are the things that I kind of value, how I do business and how I treat people. Is just like, you know, I I want what's best for you, because I know that that basically, you know, helps me. But ultimately, I want what's best for, you know, for them. And I also feel that you know, is not only just with my, you know, borrowers and clients, but with my real estate partners as well. And then, you know, that's kind of where, you know, our realtor partners, you know, have become some of my best friends. And I have clients that I still, you know, reach out to and talk to, and stuff like that as well. So I think that part is, you know, although it's not, you know, I can't write down like exactly, you know, quantify how much, you know, my character or what I do and how I care for people, you know, throughout a transaction makes me revenue or whatever. It's just who I am. That's just a value that, you know, my parents raised me to be respectful, to listen. And I just try to, you know, go through my transactions and my interactions with people, you know, the same way, and just, you know, give them my ear and offer them good advice, and hopefully, you know, that aligns with what they're looking for.
So it's well said, and it highlights what we talk about all the time, which is accountability comes with humans, right? I mean, it takes you caring about their experience, what happens beyond that transaction, to try to insert the empathy, compassion, thoughtfulness, anticipation, all the things that only you as a person can offer. And that's what ultimately attracts people to working with, you know, originators, and why, as much as the technology is massively helpful for efficiency, convenience, ease, speed, all those things, it still has to be on the other end, received and operated by somebody who is going to offer those. That's what people are looking for, to ensure that they don't make a mistake, that they end up in a good situation and they feel confident that they can proceed with hundreds of thousands of dollars of, you know, liability and assets being, you know, put on the line. So that's great input, great thought, and certainly something that from a you know, borrower's perspective, uh, you should value someone that's going to be invested in your experience. So really loved hearing your thoughts today, Caleb. I think you've got a lot of depth in your experience and knowledge, and looking forward to doing this again with you soon, man.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was fun. You know, can't say I've ever been on a podcast before, but it wasn't too hard.
You're a natural, man.
I wish. I mean, me and Tranker will have to compare notes after this.
Yep.